Hello and welcome back to the Rekt Capital channel, and welcome to today's video about the coronavirus, the global recession, and how this correlates with Bitcoin's price. Bitcoin crashed 53% over the past 48 hours, so it has been a tough time in the market for investors, not only in the cryptocurrency markets, but also in the traditional markets as well. But we're seeing a lot of correlation, and we're going to be talking about the correlation between the global recession and the coronavirus, and how this can give us insight into when is the best time to buy Bitcoin. Because after all, extreme fear precedes financial opportunity, and it is one of the best times to actually buy back into the crypto market. And as the quote goes, buy when there's blood in the streets, even if the blood is your own. So let's dive right in to the video. We can see that every time we see an increase in mentions for the coronavirus, Bitcoin's price actually goes down. And this is a correlation we've spoken about on the channel, so I'm not going to go into too much detail today, because essentially speaking, coronavirus is pretty much synonymous with uncertainty and fear. So if we're seeing uncertainty and fear go to the upside alongside the increasing mentions of the coronavirus, then we're actually going to see a decline in Bitcoin's price action, because it's fundamentally an uncertain, high-risk, speculative, volatile asset. But we're also seeing the strong correlation, and the same one really, with the keyword recession. And in fact, it's quite interesting to see that we have a very strong correlation between the recession and the keyword people. Here's the coefficient, the correlation coefficient of 1. So that's a very strong correlation between these two words, people and recession. But there is a very strong correlation also between crypto and recession as well. So 0.84, which is very strong, in fact. So many people are actually considering, or at least thinking about, talking about crypto amidst fears of a global recession. And in fact, every time we see an increase in total mentions for a global recession, for the keyword recession, we're also seeing decreases in the price of Bitcoin. So this is the same exact inverse relationship between the coronavirus and Bitcoin's price, and the recession keyword and Bitcoin's price. The same exact correlation, which is fundamentally underpinned by uncertainty and fear in the global economy and overall in the world today. So obviously, if we're seeing a strong correlation, an inverse relationship between the recession and crypto and Bitcoin, then of course Bitcoin won't do well. After all, the US stock market suffered its worst crash since 1987. So this is really scary and a momentous event in history. History is being written, and it's interesting to see that the Fed will inject $1.5 trillion into the stock market just to prop up and just prevent unusual disruptions in the markets, to curb the downside that we're seeing in the traditional markets. But the thing is, nobody's going to do this with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a protocol, a decentralized protocol, and it does have the halving coming up near the beginning of May, roughly speaking. So it's just very interesting to see what's going to be happening, because we have this market structure for Bitcoin. We've seen a lot of capitulation in recent days, and the thing to bear in mind is, whenever we're seeing a lot of uncertainty in the global economy and in the world at large, really, because of this virus, people are going to be fearful, and they're going to be looking for cash. They're going to be taking out from their investments because they're uncertain. They want to have that emergency buffer in their bank account just in case, to be prepared for whatever happens, in case there's an apocalypse. And of course, there won't be an apocalypse. It's not going to be as bad as people really do think it will be. And this is just the way that the human mind works. It over exaggerates, and this is why we're seeing stores run out of food supplies as people stock up on toilet paper and food and canned food and whatnot. So we're seeing a lot of that extreme fear really influence behavior, and it is one of the reasons that we're seeing this strong sell side candle in Bitcoin's price action. But there are many other reasons, and I talk about these reasons in yesterday's video, so check it out. It's in the top right hand corner if you'd like. So if we look at this recent candle for Bitcoin, many people are cashing out, but those are essentially the weak hands. Those are the investors investors that don't really want to have exposure to an uncertain, speculative, high-risk, volatile asset that is Bitcoin, and they just want to have that buffer, that cash buffer, just in case. So essentially speaking, the weak hands have been shaken out, very much so, because if they're not really interested in holding Bitcoin, they're easily going to take out their money whenever they see a crash like this. And it's this sort of cascading behavior driven by fear predominantly, and that fear for their safety amidst this global crisis that is the coronavirus. And we're seeing in this candle that people are really rushing to sell Bitcoin as quickly as possible amidst everything that has been going on. So the question is, have all of the weak hands sold? Whenever we have these adverse market conditions, it's very important to think about the market psychology, the psychology of the sellers. People want to get out as quickly as possible, in the same way that people want to stock up on food as quickly as possible just to protect themselves from going out and being able to self-quarantine when we have this virus. It's this sort of behavior and this herd mentality that we're seeing on a global scale that is really influencing behavior, and it's this behavior we need to think about. And perhaps even a few long-term hodlers have sold as well on this drop, as on-chain analytics also show, but it's not a significant percentage. So by and large, it's interesting to see that the hodlers are actually holding their Bitcoin. But the other thing that we need to bear in mind is what happens next. Even if this is capitulation, a sell-side exhaustion where there isn't a strong interest to sell anymore, even if that's the case, we still need to see buy-side interest, and people have to want to buy Bitcoin. So the question is, when is the best time to buy Bitcoin? And to answer that question, knowing that technical analysis goes out the window during these sort of black swan events, even though we have this market structure right now, generally speaking, we have to look at the trends in the global markets and also with the coronavirus. So it's very important to realize that if you want to time an entry into the Bitcoin market, if you want to buy Bitcoin at a good cheap discount, you have to bear in mind that this will coincide, buy pressure for Bitcoin will coincide with a reduction in uncertainty when it comes to the coronavirus. Because for people to buy Bitcoin, they have to feel like they can take on a bit more risk. They have to be a bit more risk seeking, whilst at the moment there's a lot of risk avoidance going on in the market. People want certainty rather than uncertainty. So at which point will we see that shift in psychology, that psychological inflection point where people will want to seek out risk and seek out uncertainty so as to have that prospect of reward, those asymmetrical rewards that Bitcoin can provide? And to answer this question, we have to look at the different curves in the growth rate that we're seeing for the coronavirus worldwide. And there are two curves that we need to distinguish here. One curve is the exponential curve, and any Bitcoin investor is very much aware with exponentiality. We just see growth that seems unstoppable and is pretty much unsustainable in the long run because it always comes crashing down. But when we see exponential growth rates, exponential growth in the coronavirus and the confirmed infections, we see this sort of exponential curve going to the upside. We see that Iran has one of those exponential curves when it comes to the coronavirus trajectory and infection rates. Italy leads the charge as well, and we're already seeing that Norway, Netherlands, Sweden, the UK, Switzerland, the US, they all have exponential curves. So we can see that the coronavirus is infecting more and more people, and there are newer and newer cases every single day. So that's the first curve we need to pay attention to, the exponential curve. The other curve that we need to talk about is the logistic curve, and we might be seeing this in South Korea. So we had that exponential curve, this blue line right over here. We saw new cases every single day. We saw doubling, or whatever that growth rate was, doubling of new cases each day. We started to see a slowdown in the exponentiality of that curve, and then we actually saw a slowing down in the curve, a slowing in the progress of infection rates and now we're seeing that logistic curve. And 3 blue and 1 brown really does a very good explanation of the logistic curve and the exponential curve in the context of the coronavirus. So this is essentially the curve that we're seeing for South Korea, that we saw that exponentiality take place, but then we're seeing a slowing in the growth, because after all, this is the exponentiality that we're seeing with all of these different countries. We're seeing that with the UK, the US, Switzerland, Norway, Netherlands, Iran, Italy. We're seeing exponential growth in the coronavirus. But the thing to bear in mind is, and South Korea is a very good example of this, that exponential growth doesn't occur forever. That there will be a point where this exponential growth will slow down and it will start to take the shape of the logistic curve. And this is called the inflection point in the growth rate. And remember, I also mentioned the psychological inflection point, where people start to have that certainty that the situation is being put under control, and then they start to become, rather than risk averse towards investments, they will start to become a bit more risk seeking towards investments. And this is the inflection point for the growth rate of the coronavirus, but also the inflection point for the psychology of market participants when it comes towards Bitcoin. And the inflection point when it comes to the growth rate of the coronavirus is pretty much the moment where we see new cases, definitely new cases being confirmed, but we're not seeing that sort of doubling every single day. We're not seeing that doubling or tripling in cases, because this exponential growth is being finally controlled for. So let's say we're seeing 300 cases yesterday, but today we're seeing 300 as well, and then 300 tomorrow, and then 200, and then so on. So we're seeing that slowing. We're not seeing that exponential increase, but we're seeing a constant growth, and that's that constant growth that precedes a slowing down in the growth. So with South Korea, you can see back here that South Korea had that exponential growth. This is the blue line, the blue exponential growth. For South Korea, we saw that growth really become exponential, but then it truly changed into a logistic curve. And people are very fearful that we're just going to see exponential growth happen, and the coronavirus is just going to take over the world. And that simply won't happen if we take appropriate measures. And once we take those appropriate measures, we won't see this exponentiality anymore. We're going to see a slowing down in the progress of this growth. So if we look at very simple maths here and tie that in with a bit of psychology, we're waiting for that inflection point, and we can just study different countries because the news is publicly available to us. We can check out the growth rates, we can see how many confirmed cases there are each and every day, and if you just compare the confirmed cases from yesterday, let's say in the UK for instance, and the confirmed cases today, you can actually calculate the growth rate that way. So if the amount of confirmed cases today is higher than the amount of confirmed cases yesterday, then that growth is still exponential, but only at the inflection point where the growth from yesterday equals the growth from today. That's the inflection point where we're actually seeing that growth rate really stabilize and start to slow down slowly. So when's the best time to buy Bitcoin? The best time to buy Bitcoin right now is to look at this inflection point when it comes to the growth rate of the coronavirus across all these different countries. And once you start to see the growth rate slow down, this is where we're going to see the fear subside, the uncertainty subside. And of course, this can still have ramifications for the next few weeks and even months. But people need to feel that sense of safety and uncertainty. They need that back. And it's very important that we need to take appropriate measures for us to reach that inflection point sooner rather than later. Because of course, the sooner we reach that inflection point, the better, the less lives that will be lost, the less confirmed infections that we'll see. But until that point, you can see that there are many countries still on their exponential curves when it comes to the growth rate of the coronavirus and confirmed cases. So I wouldn't be looking for a bottom right now when it comes to Bitcoin's price. I wouldn't even want to be placing myself in a position where I'm trying to guess the bottom. It's very important not to try to do that because we are in turbulent, uncertain times right now. And it's very important to manage our risk, whether that's managing our risk in terms of how we conduct ourselves outside in the public. We have to avoid crowded areas. to avoid the spread, we have to wash our hands, we have to limit contact, close contact with others, we need to take it down a notch when it comes to our social life. We have to take all of these measures to increase the chances of that inflection point coming sooner rather than later. So we have to manage that risk in terms of our health, but we also have to manage our risk in terms of our financial health as well. So jumping into a Bitcoin investment right now is a bit of a risky approach because we don't know where the bottom is. It is still very volatile, it's still very uncertain. But if you're a long-term hodler and you've been wishing for these price levels for a while, then that's a different story. If you're a long-term hodler, then you might want to dollar cost average and buy this fear, because after all, extreme fear precedes financial opportunity. But at the same time, it's very important to say that this extreme fear is going to be around for a while, for the next few weeks or even months. So until that extreme fear subsides and we get that psychological inflection point and also that actual mathematical inflection point when it comes to the growth rate of the coronavirus transmission, until we get those inflection points, we're still going to see that fear, we're going to still see that uncertainty, and the market, the Bitcoin market, won't necessarily rebound that quickly. So it's actually very important to bear these things in mind when considering an investment in Bitcoin. But at the same time, we have to know that around 50 days, 50 to 55 days away is the Bitcoin halving, where we will see a supply shock, a cut in half when it comes to Bitcoin supply in terms of how many Bitcoins are being created every 10 minutes by miners. Could we reach an inflection point in terms of the growth rate by the time the halving hits, by the time the halving occurs? It'll be very interesting to see how these two things coincide going forward. In the meantime, that's about it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video and found value in it, please consider dropping a like and of course subscribe for more videos like this in the future. I'm more than happy to continue pumping out this content on a daily basis for you guys, as long as you guys find value in it. So please consider dropping a like, subscribe for more videos like this in the future. I'm Rekt Capital and I'll see you in the next one. Speak soon.